Welcome to the Midland Money Mindset. This is a podcast that's all about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money. In every episode, we go deep with engaging guests who provide tangible takeaways and a whole lot of joy along the way. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. Let's dive into today's show. Well, I have the pleasure today of being with Kevin Espiritu, the founder and CEO of Epic Gardening. It is a pleasure to have you join us today, Kevin. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so listen, we're going to talk a lot about what you're doing today in Epic Gardening, but I am, as well as our listeners, always fascinated by the entrepreneurial journey. So can you take a few minutes to kind of explain your path to founding Epic Gardening?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's kind of a winding path, and you'd think a guy who was founding a gardening company would have been a gardener growing up, but that actually wasn't the case for me. So I didn't grow up gardening. I, excuse me. Sorry, Larry.
That's okay.
I'll restart from that beginning part, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
You would think that a guy who runs a gardening company would have grown up gardening, but I did not. So I grew up, going to science camps and being into nature and collecting rocks and coins and stuff, but somehow never was a gardener until about my early 20s. I'd come out of college. I was at UCSB with an accounting degree, business economics accounting degree. Didn't want to use it. I had played online poker to kind of like pay for my education there. And that dissuaded me from going into work, 80 plus hours a week at Deloitte and Touche or something like that. So
Right.
After that, though, I kind of floundered around in my early 20s trying to figure out what to do next. And gardening was a hobby that I was using to kind of just get myself off the computer, get myself back into nature. And lo and behold, I started a little blog that then became a YouTube channel, that then became a podcast and physical books and products and all that kind of stuff. And so now I've built Epic Gardening, which is one of the biggest sort of gardening platforms in the world for teaching people how to grow. So it's kind of funny that to get off the computer, I ended up building a business that's also, very, very digital in its nature. Hopefully not as digital as, my old days playing poker, but that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah. Did you have any kind of entrepreneurial druthers when you were younger, or family that kind of led you to think that might be a direction that you wanted to go in, or is it just something you kind of found on your own organically? No pun intended, by the way.
I just picked almost out of a hat a hobby, and it happened to be gardening. So it's just sort of random that it ended up being this in a way. Maybe I would have discovered it at some point, no matter what I did, but I'm glad that that's the one that I ended up doing for sure.
Well, at least it's something you love. We had somebody on the show who started basically two businesses from things that he didn't like to do. He started a museum tour business. He never liked museums, and created a very successful business touring museums, and ended up exiting the business. So
That's Nick, right?
yes, Nick. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice that you found something that you enjoy and you've been able to make a business out of it. So how does a self-taught gardener become the plant daddy? How does that kind of transition take place?
Well, I did the unthinkable, and I gave myself my own nickname, which you should never do. So that one's self-appointed, but no, I mean, it's just a curiosity to grow different plants, curiosity to grow how plants work, how fruit trees work, how herbs and vegetables and all sorts of things. It's just fascinating to me. And so, you are cultivating life when you're growing a plant, right? And so, in a
Sure.
way, you could metaphorically say I'm the father of those plants, I suppose. So that's why I gave myself that name.
Yeah. I tell you, I wish I had a green thumb. I do not have a green thumb. I have one plant that has survived a very long time, and I'll knock wood. It was a money tree that I bought when I was in Orlando, actually at Disney World. It was one of these, in the gift shop, said it needed low light. I was like, you know what? If it's living here, maybe I could actually cultivate this thing. And I brought it back. It's probably been with me in about 10 plus years and has grown significantly. And
Mm.
I give you a lot of credit because it's the one and only thing that I've ever been able to get to actually grow and stay alive. So It's amazing that and I can see the benefits, and you really sitting back and appreciating what you've done as you've seen something go from a seed to a plant, etc.
Yeah.
People would say that you took one of the oldest activities in the world, really, and turned it into an empire that is epic gardening. I mean, obviously you had the passion, something you enjoyed. What then kind of led you down the path of saying, "Hey, I'm going to take this from where I am today and grow it into this empire that as it is today?"
I really didn't ever expect it would get to this level for quite some time. I mean, early, like I said, it was a blog, it was a YouTube channel, and I really just wanted to do what I wanted to do in life. I didn't want to work at a place I didn't enjoy, right? And so, hence, kind of going away from accounting, or just not even applying in the first place, which is certainly a strategy. Um, but for me, I wanted to just earn enough to kind of continue to do that. I would continue to garden and talk about it and enjoy it. And a few years in, sort of realized, this could be something that is much broader than what I'm doing now. And so I sort of saw the potential as the potential was being realized. Didn't have this like crazy vision at the outset of starting a little blog, right? That it would become what it is. But 3, 4 years in, started to say, I could offer products directly to my audience because I actually know what is a good gardening product because I actually am a gardener. And so that's sort of where the genesis of, like, I'd call it the 2.0 version of epic gardening formed, was when I started offering products to the audience.
Yeah, so I mean that vision obviously, has changed significantly from way back when, and I guess you also take advantage of, the products that you're offering, and really the end result is really lends itself to social media, right? And if people follow your method, your means, use your tools, it really creates this almost self-fulfilling prophecy to some degree because others want to talk about it and show their successes. So I'm sure plays into that whole Instagram worthy environment too, which just helps things along.
Yeah, I mean, when you're making, educational content, gardening content in my case, there's a level of exposure, right? And the algorithm will sort of help propagate certain pieces of content, and it's sort of a self-fulfilling machine if you do a good job with making content. And when I say good job, I mean like actually helpful content that is valuable to the end
Right.
audience, instead of sort of self-serving content that a lot of people will be making these days.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know, you made this shift to selling physical products in 2019, and one might think that you had this amazing vision of what was coming in 2020, perhaps, maybe not. But how did the pandemic really affect what you were doing, and the growth in that area? Because a lot of
Mhm.
some businesses were affected very negatively, some very positively. So how did the pandemic affect your situation by making that change in 2019?
I mean, it was huge, right? The luck factor, and it's preparation and luck at the same time, right? Like all things, but
Luck
the
by
luck factor,
design.
luck by design, is a good way to put it. Yeah. So the luck factor is that the infrastructure for e-commerce, which I had set up in 2019, was set up before a pandemic happened, which forced people to be locked in their homes, which forced them to look for hobbies to do when they're locked in their homes, which ended up being gardening, baking, carpentry, sewing, right? All these sort of home hobbies. So very fortunate in that case. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no denying that any sort of larger scale business usually has some sort of tailwind that pushes them at some point in time, right? You just kind of have to be in the position to receive it. And we were in the pandemic. It was wild. I mean, the subscriber counts were going up like crazy just because more people were searching for it. And we were at a point where we could not keep in stock. There's nothing we could do. If I had somehow known it was coming, I would have bought way more product to be able to offer to the customer. I didn't know that. So I was kind of running and gunning, trying to buy as much as I could and ship it out as fast as I could. But you can only do as much as you can, especially because it basically ruined all global shipping and logistics for a couple of
Right.
years. And so there's only so much you could do, but it was a interesting time for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you would have had a shift and had the knowledge to really load up on that product because it was great that you sold out. But a lot of the issues that you were having in continuing, I guess, to deliver on those orders really was out of your hands because the stuff wasn't really even showing up for you to push along to the end user, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there were times where we would say, you're ordering product in like a 40-foot shipping container, for example, right? So I'd order five, six at a time, and I'd put the stock on the website in pre-order status, and I'd say, look, the world's crazy right now. I have this many units. I think I'm getting them in about 90 days. It could be longer. It probably won't be shorter. So if you're buying this right now, just please know that you're going to be getting it effectively when I get it. And I don't actually know when that is, which that would never be acceptable today, right? I could not pull that off today, but it was just a different time.
Yeah. So you really had to go from, this hobby that's turned into this business to almost like a logistics professional at that point. Was that somebody, did you have somebody on your team that was, an expert in that area, or you just kind of learned as you went in
Yeah,
regards to
just kind of
what's
figured
going
it
on?
out. Yeah, I mean, you're in this particular case, we were offering one core line of product at that time. So it was a raised bed product. And so my vendor was helping me out quite a bit on that side. And then I had a third party logistics company helping to ship the product once it got to America. And so, the combination of those two partners and then just diving in and trying to learn this field, because like you said, before 2019, it was just a content
Sure.
based business. And so trying to figure out, Incoterms and payment terms and all that sort of stuff was a lot, but what else are you going to do? You're trying to figure it out at the time.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, content, the content creation piece, because I think this is something that, you've done a great job at. And I think many businesses have to either get better and refine what they're doing in this area, or even start doing it if they're not already. And you open up many of your videos by telling the listeners you should not listen to anyone who has not done what they're talking about. And
Mhm.
I tend to agree with that statement, and it's simple yet very powerful. Why do you feel that listeners need to not only hear that, but understand it as well? I think.
I think there's very few caveats I would give to that. It's a good rule of thumb for sure. Like, I'm not hiring a trainer that isn't fit personally. I
Mhm.
know that there probably is a trainer that could get me fit that is not fit themselves. I'm not saying that person does not exist, but I think as a good rule of thumb, the probability I'm going to have success is probably higher if I work with someone who's done something that I'm trying to do. It just makes sense. I mean, they've gone through the process. They actually know sort of some of the guardrails that to hold someone to, right? And so, in the case of making content, this is a particularly weird area because there are a lot of people who do sort of talk about making content and like offer a course or offer a service or coach on it. And frankly, when you look at the content that they themselves produce, you go, well, the only content you're producing is content about how you can make someone make better content. So there's no other field in which they're proficient in the world of content, right? So like, for me, if I'm offering a gardening, I make gardening content, right? It's conceivable that I could talk about how to make content in general because I've done it in a field that actually
Mhm.
isn't. It's sort of meta is what I call it. It's not like content about content. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I've just made straight up informational, educational content. And so I don't know. I think I do think it's very important to be careful who you learn from. Uh, that's just one of my sort of big tenets.
Yeah, listen, I'm with you. I mean, in my profession and our area, financial services, wealth management, the area is littered with people giving advice, video content, any type of medium that have, in many cases, no experience. I mean, do you find within the gardening realm that there are similar numbers in terms of people, producing, educating, supposedly giving out content that are not educated in this area whatsoever?
I wouldn't say whatsoever, but I would say, I mean, this is a homespun industry, right? Like you said, it's one of the oldest practices that humans have partaken in historically, and so everyone to some degree is interfacing with gardening, even just if their grandfather did it, and so everyone has a little bit of knowledge here, and that's almost the dangerous part. Is in some way you can see the success of, let's say, an epic or in another field a cooking creator, and then you can say, well, I'm going to do that, and that's fine. Like, I think that's great. More people should make content, but the tough part is when you democratize the ability to create content, you also democratize the ability to create bad content. And it's actually very difficult, I think, for the average audience member who doesn't know the field to discern what is
Mhm.
good and what is bad, because you can make bad, like factually incorrect content that actually sounds very true. And unless you have the requisite knowledge in your head to understand why it's false, you would never know. And you wouldn't, because you're a beginner consuming that content. So you don't have that knowledge, right? And so I do see quite a bit of content out there in all fields, really.
Mhm.
Finance, frankly, I'm sure you see it like crazy, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's rampant in your field, and arguably like highly irresponsible to do something like that in the world of finance, because you're impacting someone's money, right? Um, but yeah, it's a double edged sword, right? Like there's good and there's bad.
Yeah. I mean, we're hoping, I have to be very careful about what is said and what I say, in social media world because I'm regulated and I have,
Yeah,
designations, licenses, et cetera. Whereas a lot of the folks that are giving this information are not. So I can only imagine in a profession like yours where there isn't necessarily this licensing or designation, it's probably just as, if not more rampant in those areas as well. Um,
yeah.
in 2016, as you've mentioned, this was basically a hobby and a blog. And now, you have over 3 million YouTube views and growing. What advice do you have for those people who are content creators, who are doing good work, giving good information? How do they build to that type of scale in the social media verse, if you will?
I think it's such a nuanced answer, because not all fields can have accounts at that scale, right? I mean, if I was in how to make ceramic dishware or something, and that was my field, I'm not probably building a multi-million account on all these platforms, because it's a smaller industry, right?
Right.
And so there's part of it's that. So I think it's almost the wrong question to think like, how do I get to millions, or how do I get to this certain audience size? The only real like true way to grow over time in content is to produce things that are valuable to the people that you want to be consuming them. And oftentimes I think people get kind of star crossed on size of audience or view count, etc. But if you're running a business, that like the views aren't dollars.
Right.
It's a funnel, right? So it's a marketing funnel of some degree, or an audience attention funnel. And what matters if you're running the business side of it is, who's coming out the other end as a customer, and who are you serving in that fashion. And so, general rules of content though that tend to work really well is, it's a similar maxim to the, you don't learn from someone who hasn't done it themselves. The other thing I use in content is this actually helpful to the person I'm trying to make it for? And if you ask that question, actually, a lot of the times you'll find that the answer is no, especially when you're starting out, because you're trying to get something out of the audience, or at least a lot of the sort of beginner creators are. And so it's selfish content, right? Oh, I'm going to do this, so then they do this for me. Don't even worry about that. Just do stuff for the audience, and you'll be amazed at sort of what comes back.
What for you has been like the one thing that's really helped you and not necessarily, drive those views? Because I think what you were trying to say and did, and I agree with is I'm less concerned about having 3 million views and making sure that those are getting to the right people who really want to hear it and want to absorb the message and are interested and will act on it. So what's really like one thing that you find extremely helpful to creators to help them make sure that they are driving the message to the right people and raise their success of moving those folks who are listening to the message to the next iteration of where they want them to be?
It's very, it's going to be an annoying answer. It's very difficult for there to be one thing, right?
Okay.
The answer just can't be that. It isn't, and it isn't that, because let's take an example of someone who maybe is getting those types of views, right? But maybe the results aren't showing up on the backside of their business. Well, that's a totally different problem than someone that's not getting views in the first place, right? And so,
Fair enough.
if someone's getting millions of views. And I know people like this in my space and in other spaces, but they're sort of not really converting. Well, you look at the content, it's like, okay, cool. Well, this is sort of viral bait style content that is optimizing for shareability, but actually the people who are sharing it, they're just sharing it because it's interesting, it's funny, it's random, whatever. But it's not hitting the target market. And then there's people that I know that really don't get much in the way of views or likes or shares at all, maybe 1,000, 2,000 views in a particular video, but 1,000 of those views are the people that they want to serve, and they're crushing it on the back end of their business. And so I think you just really have to disconnect from, um, those sort of those vanity metrics being objectively good, right? Sometimes they're
Right.
just not. Like I would imagine. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but in your space, if 1,000 people were to listen to this show and sign up for your services, that's a killer result for you.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It would probably transform your entire
If they were the
business.
right people for us, yes.
Sure, exactly. So let's say after listening to this show, 500 people that were the right people, right down your alley of your perfect customer, like sign up. You only need this to get 500 views. If those 500 were that person, that'd probably like break your business because it'd be too many clients to take on
Right.
or something, right?
Agreed.
Um, so that could look like an abject failure from the outside. 500 views, 500 downloads, but it's the right 500. I mean, I used to work at a publishing company, and a woman wrote a book. She's a pop-up retail expert, and so we wrote a book with her. I forgot what it was called, Pop-up Revolution, I think maybe. 500 people bought that book, which is actually not that bad in the world of first time authors. But regardless, like it's not some smash bestseller.
Right.
One of the people who bought the book was higher up at Coca Cola, was an exec there, and gave her $1 million contract to do a pop up experience. That's all she needed. That's
Right.
all that book did for her,
Yeah.
right? And so it doesn't even matter that she doesn't have any social media at all. She just has that one thing. So that's kind of the nuance
Yeah.
to it.
Has there been one really good tool that's helped you kind of get better at creating content, or, somebody you followed or something like that?
Yeah, just YouTube. I mean, just watching YouTube. So there's two ways that YouTube is good. Um, well, YouTube is the best platform in general, in my opinion, because it's the most sort of info rich. But one way it's good is that as you watch YouTube and just sort of enjoy the content you're watching, I don't know, you watch a financial podcast or you watch an explainer video or something that you just enjoy, you can be thinking about it. Why is this working? Why do I enjoy this? Why
Mhm.
what is drawing me in about this content? And then there's also the informational side of YouTube where there's a ton of creators out there teaching you for free how to make a better YouTube thumbnail, how to make a better Instagram reel, how to make, a better podcast, gear reviews. Like there's all that stuff. It's all there effectively for free, but you do have to kind of search around for it.
Interesting. So use it as an educational tool as well as an entertainment tool as well.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the things that we've definitely seen is attention shrink, right? People getting their attention spans and keeping them longer. And this has really led to an increase in short form video. How has this kind of shift changed your views and how you approach content creation as a result?
I mean, quite a bit. I think it changed everyone's game a bit. I mean, I got on TikTok in August 2019, I think. So relatively early, not crazy early, but pretty early relative to most people. And so there really wasn't another gardener, I don't think, on the platform of scale. And so, early on, that's just a supply demand problem. I'm the only person there with the supply, and there is some demand for gardening content on the platform. So we sort of accrued a nice following there in the early days. And what that made me realize is there's an appetite for this vertical short form video right now. It's easier to consume, it's sort of addicting, etc. But I need to play this in a way where it's still fulfilling the mission of our company, which is teach the world to grow. And so I can't just be dancing and grow this, some sort
Mhm.
of weird content. I transform the format to what we do best, which is educate and entertain and inspire, right? And so what ended up happening is TikTok starts to blow up. So then every other platform goes, well, we're going to be left in the dust unless we sort of rip this format, right? So then you have
Mhm.
Instagram Reels, you have YouTube Shorts, you have Facebook Reels, and so what ended up happening at that point in time was basically a complete ungating of platform growth for the last like 2 or 3 years. If you were in short form video on all the platforms, that is what they were pushing at that time. So there was if you wanted to grow, there was really no excuse not to be putting out short form video. And it's a different skill set. To your point, the attention shrink was crazy, right? So you have to
Yeah.
understand, how do you hook someone in less than a second? There's got
Hmm.
to be a visual element to that first frame. There's got to be some sort of short, snappy, curiosity inducing hook, as they say. And then you have to make sure that you're architecting the video in such a way that they actually watch it to the end, or hopefully they watch it to the end. And there's ways that you can do that better. There's ways that you can do that worse. What's interesting is you notice all the creators that came out in short form, like the Charlie D'Amelios of the world, or these big short form TikTok stars that came out, that have tried to translate their audience to a longer form like YouTube, and they are struggling because it's a completely different skill set to hold someone's attention for 30 seconds versus 15 minutes.
Hmm.
And so it was a very interesting time. I mean, I think we're well like 5 years into this whole trend now, so I think we're seeing some interesting reactions to the whole short form movement. But it was a very interesting time to be making content.
Yeah, you're right. It's such a different skill set too, and there's so I think that to some degree there's more that needs to go into the short form, even though it's much shorter than you have to on the long form piece. In
Hmm.
terms
Hmm.
of getting that right. It's very difficult for sure.
It's down. Yeah, I know. I agree with you. I think it's down to the frame, is how
Mm,
I think about it. And so,
yeah.
when I'm editing clips together or editing the audio, it's down to a frame level, right? 24 frames a second. I'm clipping 2 frames off here and there just because why have them if they're not necessary, right?
Right. Yeah, you
Versus
got to be very intentional.
yeah, it's wild, and that's the best of the best are doing that. But this does go back to a little bit of what we talked about earlier. Is you can optimize short form to get high retention, high views, but it still has to do something for you as a business owner, right?
Hmm.
And it has to serve the audience in a way that gets them to something that actually drives your business. Otherwise, there isn't actually really that much of a point to doing it.
Agreed. Agreed. So, when did you decide? Because I think this is a point where many entrepreneurs struggle, right? In terms of hiring. When did
Mhm.
you decide to start that process, and how do you recommend others start looking at prioritizing tasks to hand off, or utilize that new stakeholder for your company?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have done a better job during the scaling up of the company doing this, because I did it a bit slow. I was conservative, and I was running it more as a cash flowing lifestyle business. So I was, taking profits out of the company and investing them in stocks and in bonds and real estate, et cetera. And in the last couple of years, we've really scaled up and gone more for growth. And so that, of course, requires more people, more talent on the team.
Mhm.
So the thing I always say to like beginners in business, or whether it's a content business or anything else, like they're a solopreneur, right? Is I
Mhm.
go, just how figure out how many hours a week you spend on the business, and then list what you're doing for all those hours, and then sum up the hours into like sort of chunks of tasks. And then there's like 2 columns you can write. You can say, how important is this task category to the business itself, like 1 to 5. 5 is the most important. And then the second column is like, how important is it that I'm the human that's doing that task? And so you're looking for 1 and 1, basically.
Mhm.
Lowest importance to the business, but still needs to be done. And it's very unimportant that I'm the person doing it. That's the first stuff you start hiring out. So you look for stuff you're spending a lot of time on that's low in those 2 numbers. And then you go, okay, well, what role fills that? And then you just hire that person. So for me in the early days, I had written 400 blog articles for the Epic Gardening blog. And I was like, it's still important to write blog articles, of course, but I've done it so much. I think I can train someone how to do it well, so that I can do something that's of higher value to the business. And so the first hire was a writer. And then the next time I was like, well, and I'm spending 20 hours a week, not writing, but promoting the articles. And I've systemized this. So I'll hire someone to run that system, and then I'll move to YouTube. Right. And it just kind of keeps going that way, to the point where you get to a scale where the only thing you should be doing is figuring out how to hire people. Eventually, that's kind of where you end up.
Mhm. Driving vision, right? Driving the
Hmm.
vision for the organization. Delegate and elevate is what they call it. I think that's Dan Sullivan and
Yeah.
Gino Wickman's terms for the that process that you just
Yeah.
succinctly outlined, which is excellent. And I have to commend you. I learned something from you in the process of working with you to get you onto our show, which we're now implementing into our process. Because, like you, I get asked to be on podcasts quite often, and I think when we engaged with you, you had said, email so and so, which is who handles your calendar, and
Hmm.
use this code word so they
Hmm.
know that it was a legit,
Yeah.
reach out. And I think that I learned I never had done that before, and I thought that was a great method and means of handling things because it just makes it easier to make sure that your team knows, hey, this is somebody and something that I want to do. So please make sure you handle it versus some other method where, they'll reach out and not have that same
Yeah.
engagement. So thank you for teaching me that. That was great. And my team loved it too.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
we learned from that.
I appreciate you not saying the code word because then other people would would email, you know.
I,
But yeah, I
yeah.
mean, it was just one of those things. I think I just have a pretty systematic mindset, and so in my mind, I go, well, hey, if you guys email me to be on the show, and then my assistant asks me if it's legit, why don't I just give them something so that she doesn't have to ask me, right? And so
Right.
it's just one little communication step that got removed.
Yeah, and I love it. We're very process oriented here. We run our firm on EOS, and
Mm,
try to implement as many processes and procedures as we can. And like you said, it eliminates that one step, which is now we're finding very helpful. So thank you for that. And I would never share the code word, so it's our little secret. So through your growth from hobby blogger to YouTuber to entrepreneur, where do you continue to find that inspiration, right? And that drive to continue to expand and grow? And what resources have you found most helpful to help you in doing that and in keeping focused and growing?
I mean, for me, the interest in learning new skill sets, I think, is most of where it comes from, and that's in the garden, in the craft I'm actually talking about, but also in businesses as well. You know, getting into e-commerce in 2019 was obviously a good business move, just sort of sound business logic. But also, I was like, you know what, I kind of want to know how this world works. I've never done it before. How does it work to order product, and how does it work to ship it out, and all that kind of stuff. And so I think the curiosity has driven me more than anything else. But also just talking to other people. I have a lot of friends that are in various aspects of business, authors, e-commerce folks, advisors, etc. And it's always just interesting to hear what they're doing. And so I go, oh, okay, that's cool. Maybe I could apply that to what I'm doing, and just sort of a never-ending game.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme amongst entrepreneurs, right? Is having that curiosity because that's really what, motivates you to grow and, figuring out a way to make something better, improve. That's really what the whole idea and impetus behind an entrepreneur is. So I think that's
Yeah.
something that's very valuable and probably a must have if you want to be successful and continue to grow your business.
I think so. I mean, the whole like innovator's dilemma, or be the first to destroy your own business type of thing. You have to think that way if you're building for longevity, at least, right? Because
Hmm.
I mean, even Google right now. I just read an email. There's a Twitter account I follow called Internal Tech Emails, and it'll share leaked tech emails, usually through like court documents or something. And someone at Google in 2018, after some sort of AI had come out, I forgot the name of it, but this was like an earlier version, basically wrote a missive to the company saying like we're going to be screwed in 5 years if this will destroy our business within 5 to 10 years unless we're ahead of it. And lo and behold, what comes out 4 years later, ChatGPT.
Right.
And Google, at least as far as I can tell right now, is behind the ball relative to all the other companies in AI, the big tech companies. And so it's like you have to destroy your own business to keep it going
Hmm.
effectively.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, listen, I appreciate you coming on. We ask each of our guests the same last question. It's clear you get a lot of joy out of gardening and what you've built here. But the last question is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
You know what I did this? It's only 10:09 a.m. here, so I haven't had a lot to do quite yet. But I had a little morning coffee and I wandered out into the garden. I fed my chickens and got some sun. You know, the environment I think is being in a good environment. I think is very important. I used to not think that, and so just little things like that set you up for the day that makes me feel good.
I love it. I love it. Well, Kevin, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We're going to have all of your information in the show notes. But if people want to follow you, learn more about you, learn more about Epic Gardening and what you're up to there, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, just epicgardening.com. The store is shop.epicgardening.com. You can kind of get to all our socials and media from either of those sites.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I appreciate your time and enjoy the day.
Hey, thanks, Larry. Appreciate it.